to paint our advanced arrangement. I've switched paint palettes to a Kurotake Japanese palette and my other personal palette because I like how the paint mixes better. It doesn't beat up quite as much. I like to use these Japanese watercolors because they're so rich and intense. They're more opaque than Western watercolors. So it's just kind of fun to play around with different types of paint. And these ones are so beautiful, strong, and vibrant. And there are several really great options for blues and indigos. And because I'm using a lot of purple and blue and green in this painting, I thought this would be a great time to use this. Now I'm just mixing up a dusty blue to paint my hydrangea, adding in a touch of yellow because in the center of the hydrangea is instead of it going from dark to light like we did with the peonies, it goes from light to dark. So I'm going to try and recreate that in my painting. I'm also trying to make a conscious effort with this painting to mix some of my colors ahead of time as opposed to on the go like I did with the previous painting. Either method is fine, but it does help with consistency throughout your painting if you do mix your color palette ahead of time. Just like with our basic painting, I'm going to go ahead and start with my biggest flowers, my showy flowers, my stunners, as we called it in our arranging section. So I'm starting with hydrangea, and each hydrangea petal has 4 or 5 oval-shaped petals. So I start from the center and just work my way out by pushing down gently with the brush tip. Doing nice C curves gives me a really beautiful smooth petal. This is my wash layer. It's just really light, translucent, and I'm going to add in some more detail later. One of my favorite things to do is to use the wet on wet method, which means that I drop paint on a loaded brush onto already wet paper. And this works really well with the hydrangea because the tips of the petals are darker than the center. And so it allows the tips of my painting to be darker and slowly bleed down and create a really natural, beautiful look that's very true to the actual hydrangea blossom. I'm now ready to start on the beautiful deep purple indigo anemones. They are so rich and stunning. I'm so excited to paint them, especially with these Japanese watercolors because they are so strong and vivid. For my first anemone, I'm going to paint it from the perspective that I'm viewing it from the side instead of from the top. So I'm going to play around with how I paint my petals. I'm going to have the rear petals be larger than the petals in the front because the ones in the front, the perspective is different. They're going to be thinner, like you're viewing it from the side. The second anemone I'm going to paint, I'm painting from the top view, the aerial view. I'm leaving in a little white space to give the illusion that there is a fold in the petal. And I'm tapping in some darker paint on the edges so that they bleed down into the center of the flower, similarly to what we did with the hydrangea. Practice painting from different perspectives. This third one is going to be from a lower angle side view. So the front petals are short and fat, and the back ones are too, with a line of negative space in between. Next, I'm mixing up a green for my Delphinium stem. The Delphinium is the tall, beautiful purple flower, blue and indigo mixed in, that flanked the Solidago. You can see that they have a black center and have some stems branching off of the main stem where each flower is formed. It's also a good practice when you are painting the little branch off stems to play with the perspective of those as well. Don't just paint them directly off of the main stalk. Start on the line that you just painted and then branch off. As you see right here, I have a drop of dark paint that gives the illusion that the branch is coming from the front of the stem, the way we're looking at it. It creates a lot more depth and looks more realistic. And just like with the hydrangea, I'm going to use really short, concise brush strokes to paint the delphinium petals. There are several petals to each bloom, as you can see in the picture beside the painting, and the color varies from flower to flower. So I'm going to mix in some purple on this next flower and some more blue so that it's not all one color all the way down the stalk. We get a nice mixture variation just like we see in real life. Now for the trickier portion of this painting, I am mixing up the color I'm going to use to paint my very light colored roses. They're not white, they're not yellow, they're not green, they're kind of a mixture of everything. So I've used a very pale tan color, mixing in a little bit of yellow and a tad bit of green to give me this very almost chartreuse color. I'm going to add in some water so that the first layer is more translucent. I'm just using nice C shapes, pushing down with my brush. As you can see from the picture, it's kind of a not quite lime, not quite lemony. It's a really interesting color. So if you have white flowers, they can be really hard to master. Just practice mixing different colors. Painting the shadows is a really good method to do. Now we can't forget the Solidago, which is the centerpiece of our arrangement. I'm just mixing up a nice vibrant green for the stalk to go right up the center. It's going to flank the top of our painting. Has a nice curve to it. And lots of little branches off. This is a bigger piece of Solidago than the one we painted with our basic arrangement. So there's going to be larger leaves and larger branches. Just use your arrangement as your guide.
I'm barely getting by, got a heavy load, it's trying to break my mind. Can you tell me what you see? Maybe help me up this wall that's been blocking me. Hey, hey, getting closer every day. Hey, hey, getting closer every day. I'm feeling like a ghost on the inside. There's an emptiness. Oh, oh. Can you tell me what you know? Calm my brain. Tell my heart not to explode. Hey, hey, getting closer every day. Hey, hey, getting closer every day. Won't stop believing till I see myself where I need to be. This voice inside.
Now I'm ready to start adding some detail into my hydrangea blossoms. And it's hard to see from the video or photo, but each center of each blossom has a few little teeny tiny ball shapes. Just the center of the flower. There's usually 3 or 4. So I'm just painting a few in each center, a nice yellowish green color, and it just adds a little more detail to your painting. Hydrangea leaves are one of my very favorite leaves to paint because they have a really dark, rich color, and I love mixing that type of green. I add in some blue, some red, and some sap green and get this gorgeous, nice, rich tone. Just filling in the leaf shape as if it's draped over the vase. Now, hydrangea leaves have a really beautiful edge. They have almost like a serrated texture. It's ridged. And so what I do is I take the very tip of my brush and I drag outward into the leaf to create these nice brush strokes. Dabbing in a little bit more color where it's darker and shaded because the flowers are hanging over the leaf. Dropping a little bit down the center of the leaf where there is a vein. Now I'm mixing up a nice yellow-green to be the stems of my anemone. Anemone stems are so curvy and really playful and fun. I love to use them in arrangements because they're very whimsical. So as I paint them, I'm not going to be constrained like I am with normal stems that are very straight up and down. I'm going to have the opportunity to curve a little bit more which is so beautiful in arrangements like this where you have lots of flowers arranged together. They also have a very weed-like foliage, which can be really fun to paint. It kind of reminds me of the leaves you have on daisies or chrysanthemums. Here's another curvy stem with that very weed-like leaf. This is the part of the painting where I'm going to go ahead and add in some detail, like the little teeny stems that are on the hydrangea and the leaves that hide out right underneath the rose blooms. And now that my roses base layer has started to dry, I'm adding in some more detail, just like we did with the peonies and the snapdragons. I'm going in with a little bit of a darker shade, starting in the center of the flower because that's where it's usually darker, adding definition to where the petals are. And this creates a more rose-like shape instead of just a white yellow blob. While I'm adding definition, I also need to work on the center of my delphinium. As you see in the picture to the left, each flower has a black center, almost like the anemones do. I'm just going to take a moment to fill those in. And last but not least, we need to fill in the centers of our anemones, which is one of my favorite things to do. I love how they have a very dark, almost black center with little stems that stretch out and have little, almost like little balls on the end of them. To create those really delicate lines, sometimes I go in with a drawing pen. But here I'm just using my spotter, which is a really fine tipped brush. And just like that, we are done. See, that wasn't so bad. You can totally do this. Just remember our basic composition rules, starting with flowers, adding in greenery, then the filler and detail, and you will be all set.